Analyzing elections as algorithms reveals why modern democracies fracture. Stripped of rhetoric, a ballot simply processes the raw data of human choice. Every algorithm operates according to an objective function, the specific target it is programmed to reach. Legacy voting systems were built for one specific objective, identifying the single most popular candidate. This objective creates a specific mathematical friction. Electing a candidate who is fanatically loved by a 51% majority mathematically necessitates the deep, permanent alienation of the remaining 49%. Instead of optimizing for the best or most popular individual, the algorithm can be set to identify the least unacceptable candidate. Mathematically, least unacceptable is defined as the point that minimizes the total residual dissatisfaction across the entire network of voters. Signal processing simulations show exactly where legacy systems fail and point toward a more stable architecture: balanced approval voting. Balanced approval voting is a system that allows voters to express both positive and negative preferences to calculate a net score for each candidate. Approaching elections as a mathematical optimization problem provides a verifiable framework for achieving long-term social stability. To find the solution, we have to look at the geometry of current system failures. Consider proportional representation. Proportional representation is an electoral system where divisions in an electorate are reflected proportionately in the elected body. This structure severs the representative from their local geographic territory, grouping them instead by centralized party lists. Because party leadership controls these lists, the system rewards strict obedience to the party hierarchy rather than individual competence or local accountability. Then there is plurality voting, or winner takes all. Plurality voting is a system where the candidate who receives the most votes wins, regardless of whether they receive a majority. The system's primary weakness is topological manipulation. Plurality systems are easily exploited by gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is the practice of drawing electoral district boundaries to give one political party an unfair advantage. Under this system, the outcome depends on how geographic boundaries are drawn, rather than the actual preferences of the people. This grid represents a population of 50 precincts, divided into a 60% yellow majority and a 40% green minority. Drawing simple horizontal districts allows the majority to dominate every single seat, shutting the minority out of the body entirely. By utilizing complex, jagged boundaries, the same dataset can be manipulated to let the 40% minority win the majority of seats. The mathematical ideal is a proportional outcome that reflects the true 60-40 split, yielding a 3-to-2 seat distribution. Plurality systems measure the geometry of the drawn boundaries rather than the intent of the voters, making the resulting government algorithmically unstable. Many advocates point to instant runoff voting, or ranked choice, as the most effective solution to these flaws. Instant runoff voting is an electoral system where voters rank candidates in order of preference. If no candidate reaches 50% of the first choice votes, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated, and their support is reallocated based on the voters' next choices. However, this elimination method fails to capture the center when voters have highly mixed preferences across multiple factions. Instant runoff uses nonlinear elimination rounds. These create chaotic data cascades that require centralized recalculation, often stalling the processing of the results. Because of these cascades, the system often yields a result that is mathematically less accurate than a simple two-round voting system. Complexity does not fix a flawed objective function. Instant runoff voting still fails to identify the true center of voter intent. The algorithm designed to identify the least unacceptable candidate is balanced approval voting. First, voters cast positive votes, approving all acceptable candidates. Second, they cast negative votes, disapproving of unacceptable candidates. To prevent a purely negative dataset, the algorithm requires that a voter's total approvals must exceed their total disapprovals. The system calculates a net score by subtracting disapprovals from approvals. This processes polarizing figures. High support and equal opposition cancel out to a near zero net score. A broadly acceptable candidate with moderate approval and few disapprovals ends with the highest net score. By utilizing disapproval, balanced approval structurally reduces the influence of fanatics and elevates the candidate with the widest social tolerance. Validating this architecture required modeling elections as a signal processing problem rather than a political contest. Researchers tested thousands of scenarios using Monte Carlo simulations on an L-dimensional sphere. A Monte Carlo simulation is a computational algorithm that uses repeated random sampling to determine the probability of different outcomes. The model applied Rayleigh fading to the data. Rayleigh fading is a mathematical model used in wireless communication to describe how signal strength fluctuates. This mimicked candidates intentionally obscuring their stances on sensitive issues to avoid losing support. Engineers then added Gaussian noise to the voter data. Gaussian noise is a type of statistical noise with a normal distribution. This represented the natural variance and unpredictability found in public opinion. They also introduced Z-channel erasers. A Z-channel is a model in information theory where some data is transmitted accurately while other data is completely lost. This modeled voters who completely ignore specific political issues or dimensions. The researchers then measured the Euclidean distance between the winning candidate and the voter base. Euclidean distance is the straight line distance between 2 points in a multidimensional space. This distance represents the average residual dissatisfaction of the society. It allows engineers to quantify the bit error rate of a democracy. Bit error rate is the percentage of errors in a data transmission relative to the total number of bits sent. The simulation results for legacy systems were consistent. Both plurality and instant runoff voting produced high rates of societal dissatisfaction, consistently failing to find the stable center. For balanced approval voting, the bit error rate plummeted, reaching the lowest dissatisfaction point tested. By identifying the least unacceptable candidate, the system significantly reduced the Euclidean distance across the entire voter network. When a population is divided equally, electing a polarizing figure creates a permanent, dangerous driver of systemic instability. Reducing the friction that leads to social collapse requires a ballot architecture that can process negative preferences. Balanced approval voting uses the mathematics of signal processing to minimize social dissatisfaction. By capturing the full geometry of public tolerance, the system builds a stable equilibrium that legacy algorithms cannot achieve.